Welcome back. Okay, Nehemiah Chapter 7. I'll read Hebrew. Linda's volunteered to do the English. Russell and Teresa uh, can cover some commentaries in English if they are still able to uh, handle that for us. It's pretty good. Appreciate the help. Okay. All right, here we go. So if we're using the group curriculum of the blue edition of the Art School Commentary, it's related to the Milstein edition. Chapter 7, verse 1. Vikasher niv nasa hachoma va'amid hadelasos va'ipakdu hashuarim ha'mashoverim va'alvim va'atzava es chanani achiv es chananya asar habira al Yerushalayim ki hu ki'ish emes v'yorei es Elohim merabim va'omar lahem lo paschu Sharei Yerushalayim ad chom hashemesh vad hem omdim yagifu hadelasos vechozu v'hamed mishmeros yoshvei Yerushalayim ish b'mishmaro v'ish neged beso. If you notice in the Hebrew in verse 3, Yerushalayim, Jerusalem is spelled without the second yud. So if you didn't have vowels, it would look like Yerushalayim. You understand?
Interesting. Is there a reason?
No, this is a common conjunction in Tanakh. This is in many books. But remember, Tanakh is not just what you see; it's also what you don't see. There is a concept of the Bible codes, right? So sometimes a letter is left off a word so that the Bible code will be perfect. But only a prophet would really understand this in the time of the writing. So, this is we just have to take this as a probable supposition, but it just so happens the Bible codes seem to work perfectly, you know. So that would be a possible explanation for this. But the original name of Jerusalem was what? Shalem or Salem, right? Uh, we if you take out the yod, now it's Shalem again. You understand? So and Yeru and Shalem together is the concept of Abraham and Melchizedek working together. So that's Melchizedek was Shem. So literally Ben Noach working together with the first Jew. So Jerusalem is a pretty cool concept. Okay, continuing in the Hebrew, let me say another couple of verses, and then we'll translate. Verse 4, Va'ir rachavas yadayim ugedola va'am ma'at v'socha v'ein batim v'nuyim v'etin elahai el libi v'ek b'tza esachorim v'esasaganim v'esa'am l'chis yaches v'emtza sefer ha'yachas ha'olim barishona v'emtza kasuv bo. Okay, in a minute, Linda will translate. Just wanted to point out again, with the writings, the prophecy was given different from the prophets. The books of the prophets were written down after the prophecy was given. The books of the writings, generally speaking, are given as a written document, and then they're read aloud by the prophets who composed it. So this is being written down with a holy writ. Now, we're going to find something very interesting that here in chapter 7 of Nehemiah, it's going to contradict some facts mentioned in book of Ezra, chapter 2. So that's going to be a very interesting thing that we could cover in today's class, hopefully, God willing. Okay, Linda, please translate verses 1 through 5 of the 7th chapter of Nehemiah.
It happened after the wall was built and I had erected its doors that the gatekeepers and the singers and the other Levites were designated. I then appointed Hanani, my brother, and Hananiah, officer of the palace over Jerusalem. For Hananiah was a man of truth and had long been God fearing. I said to them, let the gates of Jerusalem not be opened until the heat of the day. And while they are standing there, let them shut the doors and secure them. Also, establish watches by the inhabitants of Jerusalem, each man at his watch, and each man opposite his home. For the city had wide open spaces and was large, but there were few people in it, and houses had not been built. Then my God inspired me, and I assembled the aristocrats and the nobles and the people to trace their lineage. I found the book of lineage of those who had ascended at first and found written in it.
So in verse 5, you notice he said, then my God inspired me. He didn't say, and then I had a great day and I saved the day. I had a great idea and I saved the day. He's not boasting about the good that's going to happen. He's saying, God gave me a good idea. You understand? Humble, humility. That's a beautiful thing. Thank God, Baruch Hashem, this is pretty straightforward. So now beginning in verse 7, it's going to get more complicated because now we're going to start making a census of the people, but it was contradicted. It contradicts in some ways the census recorded in the book of Ezra, and according to many commentaries, this is the same. Because of the intro in verse 6, this is the same census. It was just recorded in a different way. So we're going to see that as we go further. Okay, so now in verse 5, what does he say? He found the book of lineage, right? So Nehemiah is taking a text from the census that happened a few years ago with Ezra. Okay, it's the exact same census written in chapter 2 of Ezra, right, during the rule of Zerubbabel, the previous governor. So now, if it's the same census, how come there's a different report? Okay. So let's first read the chapter, and then, God gave me some ideas of how to cover, provide a solution if the commentaries don't provide it. Maybe I missed it, but God gave me an idea how it could work out, why there's a contradiction. Okay, just before we some people may have like this comprehensive scholarly idea that they want to do a comparative study themselves. So if that's the case, open up a book of Ezra and open up the book of Nehemiah, Ezra chapter 2, Nehemiah chapter 7, and do a comparison. We're going to go too fast today for you to do it live with us right now, but this is what you could do. And to help you, in the Art Scroll Divided Tanakh series, and also here in the blue edition of Art Scroll, there is a chart about the differences. It lists all the major differences. So let's just look at that quickly. If you have the blue edition, look at the appendix on page 7. Okay, the appendix here. So there are differences in the populations between Ezra and Nehemiah, the texts. And there are differences in pronouns, in proper names between Ezra and Nehemiah. See, they're all listed here.
Did they get to choose their own pronouns, Rabbi? Is that what you're saying?
What?
Did they get to choose their own pronouns? Is that what you're trying to say? Don't pay
well, apparently, uh, they get to have one prophet choose their pronouns and another prophet choose their pronouns. So, but it's very interesting. You've actually alluded to an aspect of the answer, so it's very interesting. Okay, but so now it looks a bit differently, I believe, in the white edition. Let me remind myself that chart showing all the differences.
It's just on two different pages, but I think
Oh
it's
yeah, you're right. Two different pages, same chart. So in other words, it's a little bit bigger in the white edition, a little easier to read. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so would you like to know the answer before or after? Do you want to read it? Because in this chapter there are um, over 70 verses. So if you're impatient, I could give you my supposition, right? Now, or I could wait until after. What does the class want?
Oh, I would say let's go through the material and then you can give your supposition, but that's just me. I'm open to anything.
Okay, all right. But the subtlety is, if you don't remember Ezra chapter 2, you won't notice any discrepancy simply from the text, right? It's just the Art Scroll commentary reminded us that there's a difference. Okay, so let's then focus on reading this chapter inside. Okay, and we're in chapter 7. Okay, so let's do some of the commentary. Russell, you and Teresa can handle. Feel up to it today? Yeah.
Okay.
We got you covered.
Yeah. Okay, so the commentary on verse 5, again, verse 5, let me reiterate that. Then my God inspired me, and I assembled the aristocrats and nobles and the people to trace their lineage. And they found in the book of lineage of those who ascended at first and found written in it. Okay. So, in other words, the book of lineage, apparently, this is what, like, the people taking the census wrote in. And therefore Nehemiah is copying down literally what the census takers wrote. Therefore, what the implication is, Ezra's version is edited by the prophet. Okay. All right, so let's keep this in mind. Okay, now starting from the middle of the commentary, the phrase "and found written" in the last line on page 53, Teresa.
Okay. And found written in it following passages were written in the document found by Nehemiah. That's Rashi and Mazudos. Rashi's opinion is that the text of the document continues through 1035. Rabbi and Metronsi, however, hold that the document ends with the close of one chapter. See Commentary 7.
Of our chapter, the end of chapter 7. Okay, so this is an entirely different thing. This complexity we'll have to discuss in later chapters, because right now we're just trying to cover the longer chapter 7. However, again, a lot of these verses are very short because they're just names, so it goes, so it's not the longest chapter, even though it sounds like it has lots of verses. But so this is a secondary thing. Okay, first concept, there's a apparent contradiction, chapter 2 of Ezra to chapter 7 of Nehemiah. Second concept, it's a debate. Rashi and Metzudos hold that this census is continuing for a few chapters still after chapter 7. But Ralbag and Mitrani both agree that no, this is the entire census. The support for what Ralbag and Mitrani seem to say is the fact that chapter 2 of Ezra is talking just like chapter 7 of Nehemiah, right? The very similar data. So therefore, it seems like it's a complete echo of what happened then. But according to Rashi and Matsudos, no, Nehemiah is going to give more details than Ezra did. So, but that's just keep that in the back of your minds for future classes. We'll refer back to this concept. But the first things, my goal tonight is especially to make sure that people understand there's no real contradiction between Ezra and Nehemiah, um, and to understand how that works out exactly. Okay. Continuing in verse 6 in the Hebrew. Ela b'nei hamedina ha'olim mishvi ha'gola asher hagla Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel ve'yashuvu liYerushalayim v'Yehuda ish li'iro habayim im Zerubbabel Yeshua Nehemiah Azariah Ra'amya Nachamani Mordechai Bilshan Misperes Bigvai Nechum Bana Mispar Anshe Am Yisrael. Okay, so Linda, if you could translate verses 6 and 7.
These are the people of the country who ascended from the captivity of the exile that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had exiled, who returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each man to his city, who came with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Azariah, Raamiah, Nahamani, Mordecai Bilshan, Mispereth Bigvai, Nehum, and Benaniah, who comprised the sum of the dignitaries of the people of Israel.
Very good. Okay, so let's before we get into the part of the chapter that's mostly just names of families. Okay, so this is really our best chance to get a little commentary. So I know it's long, but if you can make an effort at it, verses 6 and 7, the commentary, Teresa.
Okay.
Thank you.
There. The book of lineage reported here is virtually identical to the list of returnees that appears in Ezra chapter 2. The reader is referred to the Art Scroll Tanakh series, Ezra, for a comprehensive treatment of the subject. Our commentary here deals mainly with the differences between the two lists. Rashi notes that although the total of 42,360 immigrants reported in Nehemiah, verse 66, coincides with the total reported in Ezra 264, chapter 2, verse 64. The numbers listed are, for some individual families, conflict, as in the case of the children of Arah, whose number 652 here and 775 in Ezra in chapter 2, verse 5. A table listing the differences between Ezra and Nehemiah can be found in the appendix at the end of this volume. Rabbi explains the discrepancies in the numbers of family members. Ezra list was compiled during the reign of King Cyrus. Nehemiah discovered the list a number of years later in the 12th century year of King Darius. By this time, some of the original immigrants had returned to the diaspora, while new immigrants had arrived in the Holy Land. Nehemiah adjusted the numbers in in his list accordingly, adding to the enlarged families and subtracting from those whose numbers had diminished through immigration. Ibn Ezra explains changes in the family totals as reflective of births and deaths, rather than rather than immigration and integration. Mezzudos adds that families too small to be considered separately had been counted by Ezra as part of other related families. By the time Nehemiah discovered the list, some of these had grown large enough to be counted as separate families. Conversely, some of those who had been counted separately by Ezra had now diminished, and Nehemiah had not mentioned them individually, but included them in other families. Metzudos notes also that the names listed in Nehemiah sometimes differ slightly from those in Ezra because both names were in use. See tables in the appendix at the end of this volume. These are the people of the country who ascended from the captivity of the exile. Metzudos here and Rashi in Ezra 2:1 identifies the people in the country as the Jews in the land of Israel. The list records the names of the Jews who had been exiled from the Holy Land in Babylon and later returned from the exile. Ibn Ezra in Ezra 2:1 identifies the people of the country as the Jews who were in exile in Babylon. Why then did Nehemiah also list those who were born afterwards in the land of Israel? Question mark. The phrase people of the country, Ibn Ezra answers refers to the great majority of those listed, but not to the few who were born later. Nehemiah included this phrase in his rendition of the documents in order to invite comparison with the list in Ezra chapter 2, so that the reader might observe which families had grown in number and which had declined.
Okay, you can pause there. Okay, so two problems, right? The first problem is that the numbers are different, except the numbers are the same. Where was the number same? The reading comprehension question. Where was the number exactly the same between Ezra and Nehemiah? That was in the total immigrants. That's in okay. Both agree there was 42,360. Okay, so let's address the first of these two problems, right? Different names and different math, except the math is not completely different. Therefore, the math problem is not the biggest problem. The different names is the biggest problem, right? So the math problem is so what do you do with numbers, right? If the total will remain the same after, right? So you have to say that it was just categorized differently. So Ibn Ezra was talking about the totals were that were reflective of births and deaths. Okay, so now if you say, right, that this is that there's a separate census in 2 different years, right, but it has the exact same number of people, even though that's statistically difficult to say, it's possible, right? You do have two accounts of 2 different groups of families, so that could be one answer. God is God; He could still have the exact same amount of people if He wants to. Remember, in the time of Moses, there were still 600,000 warriors at the start of the Book of Numbers and at the end of the Book of Numbers. Yes, you had a question, Elias.
Yeah, so my question was, don't mind it.
That's all right.
Light rabbinical greetings, everybody. Very late greetings.
Rabbinical greetings to you, sir.
I'm sorry, everyone, for how I acted.
It's okay.
And I'm sorry for being very late in the shir.
how you acted is not your fault. I didn't send you to acting school, so it's not your fault.
Yeah. So anyway, anyone I embarrassed in this year, I'm sorry.
No,
Hope anyone can forgive me for this.
You haven't embarrassed anyone yet, but if you do embarrass, it's nice to know at least we have your apology on the table. So if you forget to apologize later, okay, he apologized, people.
What? Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, it's all right. I just had harsh criticism from my mom. So
TMI, too much information. Thank you. TMI, gentlemen. Okay, you're a good boy. Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, the question is, how will Mashiach affect the present? Well, how will Mashiach affect the present situation we are now?
Mashiach question.
When will Hamas ever be completely destroyed today? And will we ever win?
Yes, it's guaranteed that that Israel will win. It's just a question. It could be days, weeks, months, or maybe a few years, but it's not going to be too long. It's not going to last beyond this decade. It's going to be resolved soon. Everything in the everything is pointing towards that. The you know the, the evil that Hamas did is just too profound for them to have enough support to continue their evil. They've always relied on public opinion supporting them, and they've destroyed it. In some sense. Of course, the anti-Semites, they're happier, but most people are kind of had enough of Hamas's perspective. So when Trump was talking about the Hamas had to go, there wasn't a wide spread condemnation coming from the United Nations. The United Nations says, "Well, okay, this can fix things faster." Basically, that was basically the reaction, which is really good news for good people. That the terrorists are no longer given carte blanche to continue to attack incessantly, repeatedly, perpetually. Thank God those days are ending. Okay, so let's go back to the text. Okay, verse 7. Let's skip down to Mordechai Bilshan.
Okay. The Talmud in Megillah 16b, is that where we're
Yeah.
at? Okay. Identifies him as the Mordecai who was the leader of the Jews during the Purim episode. The Talmud,
Menachos
65a, states that Bilsham was an additional name for Mordecai. The name is derived from two Arabic words meaning he mixed languages. Mordecai was a master of language. He alone could decipher the jargon spoken by some of the witnesses who came before the rabbis and even the sign language of mutes. See Shechem 5:1.
So he was of this generation. He was kind of like the Daniel of this generation, a genius who could interpret easily. Mm-hmm.
In the list recorded in Ezra 2:2, Mordecai is mentioned fifth, whereas in our list, his name appears sixth in Megillah 16b. This can be understood only if we do not count Zerubbabel. Thus, according to the Talmudic rendition, the verse is read, those who came with Zerubbabel, Jessa, and then go,
etc. Yeah.
The Talmud explains that Mordecai's standing among the great men of the generation was reduced from fifth to sixth because his diligence in studying
his
Torah.
exalted position, right? Oh no, right. Yeah, sorry. Please continue.
His in studying Torah was reduced as a result of his exhausted position in the Persian court. Rabbi.
Yeah, so he was a brilliant scholar, but some of his scholarship kind of curtailed because he was so busy with politics. But remember, he was the viceroy, the prime minister of Persia, while King Darius was a little child. So he was very busy. But after Darius was no longer a little child, Mordecai remained there to try to be a positive influence. And we see as Mordecai and Esther's influence waned, Darius became less and less friendly towards Jewish people, but he never became their enemy. Thank God. So the the article commentary continues. The general rule that saving a life takes precedence over all the Torah's precepts, except for three cardinal sins, applies only where there is an imminent threat to life. In Mordecai's case, had that threat had already been averted with the death of Haman and the destruction of his followers. Mordecai, however, continued to occupy the post of chief minister in order to guard against any potential future threats. Although this too was a great mitzvah, it did not take precedence over the study of teaching of Torah, since no clear threat actually existed at that time. This is from Rabbi Yosef Chaim in his commentary, Ben Yehoyada in Megillah. So, according to the Ben Yehoyada, it would have been better for Mordecai to trust that God was going to, keep Darius righteous enough, listening to Esther, his queen mother, and Mordecai could have returned to help the sages of the generation in their great scholarship. Remember, we discussed this previously. In Ezra and Mordecai started the men of the Great Assembly, the 120 great scholars who formed what would become the sages of the Mishnah and the Talmud. So all of that was begun by the prophets in the generation of Mordecai and Ezra. So Mordecai left that. So so according to Ben Yehoyada, perhaps there would have been an extra volume of Talmud or something had Mordecai been involved. Something to that effect. Although that was written before the Gemaras. However, the Mishnah was taken from the notes of the previous generations. So had there been more extensive notes, again, that's we don't know that for sure. I mean, if I was in Mordecai's position, I certainly understand his choice to want to stay there with Darius. Besides his mother, Darius was being advised by people who are like steeped in Zoroastrian, where a person who becomes a leader is supposed to become a conqueror to prove how great he is. So in that kind of environment, that's not necessarily healthy for the Jewish people. So I find it hard to criticize Mordecai's decision, but I certainly understand where Ben Yehoyada is coming from. So but we just don't know. So now the question is this: what does Hashem ask of us? Right? Remember Micah chapter 6, verse 8. Go there for a second. Book of Micah in the 12 prophets. After the book of Jonah. Chapter 6, verse 8. He has told you, O man, what is good. What does Hashem require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with your God? Walk humbly with your God. So the question is this: what was the greater humility? To not want to take a risk with God's flock, or to not want to take a risk with God's word? There were other scholars there, right? But who could have replaced Mordecai? if it became necessary that Mordechai was there, he couldn't necessarily be a Johnny-come-lately to jump back into the picture. Very, very difficult thing, very, very difficult choice that Mordechai had. It's really hard for me to criticize his choice. So the fact that God wants us to be humble, if someone had to be a little less famous or a little less great in their achievements for the sake of a greater good, isn't that the point of walking humbly with God? Let God set the agenda, right? So,
Abba,
yes.
is it really this hard for extremely powerful tzaddikim such as David HaMelech to resist the Yitzhar Hara
We're talking about
and
Mordechai.
become Mashiach and take on the responsibility and fulfill the role of Mashiach, such as King Shaul, so that the Satan can be voided and gone from the world forever. So without harming.
What you mean is, so what you're trying to say is, so King David overcame his difficulties to become the forefather of Mashiach and the kings of Judah, correct? Okay. All right, but we are discussing Mordechai from the book of Esther. So it was.
Why wouldn't we?
So it's just a very difficult choice. Mordechai would have to. It wasn't so simple, let's say, for Mordechai to go back to the scholarship of the men of the Great Assembly, even though, I mean, is from a perspective of, do you want to sit with boring politicians or do you want to study with Ezra and Zechariah and Haggai, right? I mean, I'd rather be with the scholars, and that sounds more
right now.
That sounds more exciting. I think so. In other words, Mordechai was giving up for the sake of God's flock, and I don't think that's, generally speaking, I wouldn't criticize it, but
I wouldn't criticize him either. But
it must be right. It must be that he could have added to Torah scholarship at a level we don't perceive. The commentaries from even 1,000 years ago, they had access perhaps to more midrashim than we do, because a lot of midrashim were burnt by different nations the Jews were among. So there was one medrash quoted by a few scholars. Only the mentions in those books we have left of the medrash. All the manuscripts, as far as we know, were destroyed. So we just have snippets of one of the midrashim. So there must be a rationale behind saying Mordechai did wrong by not going back to study when he had an opportunity to protect the Jewish people more in his appraisal, right? So it's very difficult. Okay, let's continue. All right, so now we're going to do this part of the class. Let's make headway. We'll try to cover as many verses as possible with as few commentaries as possible. That way, we'll be able to finish the entire chapter tonight, and then we'll go into more commentaries, if not before that, towards the end of the chapter, when we leave behind the census and go back into discussing the wrap up of this chronicles of what happened in those times. Okay, so let's go to verse 8 in the Hebrew. B'nei Farosh alpayim mea v'shivim v'shnayim, b'nei Shfatia shlosh meos shivim v'shnayim, b'nei Arach shesh meos chamishim v'shnayim, b'nei Fachas Moav liv'nei Yeshua v'Yoav alpayim v'shmona meos shmona asar, b'nei Elam elef masayim chamishim v'arba, b'nei Zatu Shemona Meos Arbaim Vachamisha. Okay, please translate verses 8 to 13, Linda.
The children of Parosh, 2,172. The children of Shephatiah, 372. The children of Ara, 652. The children of the governor of Moab, of the children of Jeshua and Joab, 2,818. The children of Elam, 1,254. The children of Zatu, 845.
Bnei Zakoi, Shiva Meos Vishishim, Bnei Vinui, Shesh Meos Arba Ushmona, Bnei Vevai, Shesh Meos Esrim Ushmona, Bnei Azgad, Alpaim Shalosh Meos Esrim Ushnoim, Bnei Adon Nikam, Shesh Meos Shishim Veshiva, Bnei Vigvai, Alpayim Shishim Veshiva, Bnei Adin, Shesh Meos Chamishim Vachamisha, Bnei Ater, Lechizkiah, Tishim Ushmona, Bnei Chashum, Shlosh Meos Esrim Ushmona, Bnei Veitzoi, Shlosh Meos Esrim Varba, Bnei Charif, Mea Shneim Asar. Okay, please translate verses 14 through 25.
The children of Zakai, 760. The children of Benui, 648. The children of Bebai, 628. The children of Asgad, 2,322. The children of Adonikam, 667. The children of Bigvai, 2,067. The children of Adin, 655. The children of Ater of Hezekiah, 98. The children of Hashum, 328. The children of Bezai, 324. The children of Harif, 112.
Yeah, if you could pause there at 24.
Okay.
Thanks.
Whew.
Okay. So, yes, Lena's doing a great job. Very good. So, some of these names are not ones you would find in the schoolyard in Western civilization, but it's thank God. And some of these names are at least like two syllables. It's not like very complex words. So that's thank God. Okay, so this was the families, and now we're going to discuss it by city. The next group from verse 25 through 38 is going to mention the names of the cities that people came from. Back in the Hebrew, Bnei Givon, Tishim, Chamisha, Anshe Veis Lechem, Unatofa, Mea Shmonim Ushmona, Anshe Anasos, Mea Esrim Ushmona, Anshe Veis Azmavis, Arbaim Ushnoim, Anshe Kiryas Yarim, Kafira, Eros, Shiva Meos, Arbaim Ushalosha, Anshe Harama, Bagava, Shesh Meos Esrim V'echad, Anshe Michmas, Mea V'esrim Ushnayim, Anshe Veisel V'ha'ai, Mea Esrim Ushalosha, Anshe Nevo, Acher, Chamishim Ushnayim, Bnei Elam, Acher, Elef, Masayim, Chamishim Varba, Bnei Charim, Shalosh Meos Vesrim, Bnei Recho, Shalosh Meos Arboim, Vachamisha, Bnei Lod, Chadid, Vaono, Shava Meos Vesrim, Vechad, Bnei Sana'a, Shaloshes Alafim, Tisha Meos, Shaloshim. Okay, please translate verses 25 through 38.
The people of Gibeon, 95. The people of Bethlehem and Netophath, 188. The people of Anathoth, 128. The people of Azmaveth, 42. The people of Kiriath Jearim, Hephriah, and Beroth, 743. The people of Ramah and Geba, 621. The people of Michmas, 122. The people of Bethel and Ai, 123. The people of Nebo Ahir, 52. The people of a different Elam, 1,254. The people of Harim, 320. The people of Jericho, 345. The people of Lod, Hadid, and Ono, 721. The people of Senia, 3,930.
Okay, so these are the ones in the cities. Okay, now, all right, there is a verse in Ezra chapter 2. I would like to do a comparative study, but we could do that at the end of the chapter. Let's get through this chapter, and then we'll go back over it with commentaries and discussion. Any questions before we continue in the Hebrew? Any questions? Okay, verse 39 in the Hebrew. Hakonim b'nei Yedaya leves Yeshua tisha me'os shivim u'shalosha b'nei Imer elef chamishim u'shnoim b'nei Fashchur elef masayim arba'im v'shiva b'nei Charim elef shiva asar haLevim b'nei Yeshua lekadmiel lib'nei lechodva shivim v'arba hamashovarim b'nei Asaf mea arba'im u'shmona Ashwarim b'nei Shalom b'nei Ater b'nei Talmon b'nei Akuv b'nei Chatita b'nei Shovoi mea Shloshim u'shmona Hanasinim b'nei Tzicha b'nei Chasufa b'nei Tapaos b'nei Keros b'nei Si'ah b'nei Fadon b'nei Levana b'nei Chagava b'nei Shalmai. Okay, please translate through verse 48, Linda.
The
39 through 48.
Kohanim, the children of Jedidiah, the house of Jeshua, 973. The children of Immer, 1,052. The children of Pashur, 1,247. The children of Harim, 1,017. The Levites, the children of Jeshua and Kadmiel, the children of Jodiva, 74. The singers, the children of Asaph, 148. The gatekeepers, the children of Shallum, the children of Adar, the children of Talmon, the children of Akub, the children of Hatia, the children of Shobai, 138. The Nethinim, the children of Ziha, the children of Hasufa, the children of Tabaoth, the children of Kerosh, the children of Sia, the children of Padan, the children of Lebanah, the children of Hagabah, the children of Salmi. Salmei. Sorry. The
But
children of
in the Hebrew,
Salmei.
in the Hebrew it's Salmoi.
Salmoi, but in English it's Salmi. Interesting.
Okay, so
Big
now
difference.
well, close enough. Very good. Okay, so let's pause we're in the middle of the chapter. Let's pause here just to read the commentary on verse 42. Can you read that, Teresa? (42), page 57. Teresa, you there?
It seems.
Russell, you there?
It seems.
No, it's okay.
Blacked
No
out.
need for the commentary, but okay. So listen, I'll read the commentary this time, and we'll take it from there.
It's my drama fault.
The children of Harim, verse 35 already listed a Harim. Matthias explained. Just let's focus on the
Sorry,
class.
but it's my fault for
No,
causing
no,
drama.
just no.
Hey, I'm sorry. All right, I'll let you continue. Sorry for interrupting.
Matthias explains that this is a different Harim. Alternatively, the first listing, verse 35, enumerates Harim's non-Kohen, non-priest descendants. Our verse lists Harim's descendants who married Kohanim and were counted among his family members. Okay, so this concept of maybe it's his non-Kohen descendants, or maybe it's the ones from those who married other people. So it doesn't explain the whole thing by itself, but if we extrapolate this as a possible category of an answer. So this is one of my first two answers for the mystery of this chapter, why it contradicts Ezra, is because if the total math is correct of the two countings, right? Ezra chapter 2, Nehemiah chapter 7, but the individual sums are different. So therefore, we're talking about the exact same amount of people total. So therefore, the people are being categorized differently. Okay, but we don't have enough information to know exactly how they're being categorized differently. We don't know, maybe, I'm not saying this is the case. I just, as an example, maybe all the people with red hair were in one family, when all the people in blonde hair were in another family, etc. Uh, so, so in other words, how do we know in what way are people being categorized when the text is not teaching us a key to understand this map? So, but logically speaking, I think it's a slight, the concept is kind of touched on here in the commentary in verse 42. Marriages, right? What happens with a marriage? So, classically, again, women didn't have as many financial opportunities in those days. So they either had to be in the house of their father or they had to be in the house of their husband. You know, it was a difficult situation if they were not in a house with either. So therefore, at least financially speaking, So
That's sad.
right. So what it means is that we're
And
talking
it's
about
sad
so we're talking about the movement of women from one house to another. So in other words, were the women being counted by their father's house, or were the women being counted by their husband's house? This would explain the entire discrepancy, except for one of the numbers between the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah. If, for example, Nehemiah was now, how did they count? Why is there even a difference? Okay, so look at their roles. Ezra's role was to be the Moses of his generation, right? We discussed previously, he was worthy to receive the Torah on Mount Sinai had Moses not already received it. That's one of the Talmudic sayings about the great Ezra. So Ezra's goal was to teach Torah, you know, and to teach Torah, no matter what another nation would view it as. Nehemiah was an appointed governor, an agent of the emperor from Persia. Nehemiah had to not only write for himself and his people, he had to write for the emperor to read it as well. So therefore, the facts in Nehemiah, it makes sense, are the literal facts of who is in whose house according to their current location. Like a Wi-Fi tries to search your computer, can I know your current location? So it makes sense politically. Nehemiah is talking about current location of people's houses in his day, which is 20 years later. But he's doing it from the written record of the census from 20 years earlier, approximately 20 years. So therefore, he is not rewriting it to impress his emperor boss. What he's doing is he is explaining it in a way that the emperor can understand. So therefore, he goes according to current households. This is the number in this family. This is the number in that family. But Ezra, remember what did Ezra do? He divided people who were intermarried, right? In the book of Ezra. So therefore, he was concerned with people's connection to Judaism, right? So therefore, how do you make sure someone's Jewish? The house of the father, right? So therefore, my supposition, I don't have proof for this, but it makes sense under these circumstances that Ezra recorded according to the base of Iha, according to the base of the father, and Nehemiah recorded according to the base Bala, according to the husband. And the movement of the women in such a society where the women had to move around to get to earn a living, that would explain the entire thing, except for one of the numbers. One of the numbers has a discrepancy of over 100, right? If you look at this, let's go back to that chart. That chart is very helpful, so you don't have to go back to all the verses we just covered. Okay, so the family of Ara in Nehemiah 652, in Ezra 775. Right? Okay, but remember, we also read another idea. Was who said that? Was that Ralbag? Who had that opinion? That the discrepancies, yeah, Ralbag, Ralbag or Ibn. Let's see. Okay, Ibn Ezra. According to Ibn Ezra, on page 54, he said that the changes were according to births and deaths in the family, right? So births and deaths in the family. So in other words, to go according to Ibn Ezra's thing, Ibn Ezra's perspective, interpretation, explanation of the discrepancy of numbers between these two chapters, you would have to say God made it that there was the exact same amount of total Jews in the first census and the second census. Of course, God could do that, but why would he do that? You understand? So the explanation of Ibn Ezra raises another problem. But if you were to say it's according to the father's house and the husband's house, as I suggested, it seems that wouldn't be a problem at all. It seems a much more conclusive resolution. But how do you explain the family of Ara? It had over 100 different amount of people, right? So again, the total amount of people is different, right? So what if the family of Ara simply had more daughters in every member of all the cousins, every relative of the family of Ara there was, for example, one boy and four girls in each family, right? So that means that they had a great amount of girls. So therefore, they had a great amount of relocation of members of their families in that generation between censuses or between recorded census. Right. You see what I'm saying? Again, it makes sense because of the total numbers were statistically, it makes sense. These were the same census recorded in two different ways. And now I think we've come up with a theory that works. If the girls were written no longer by the base Avia, but base Bala, no longer according to the house of her father, but the house of the husband, and also the family of Anna had more girls than boys, which is not so unusual for one family to be like that. So then that perfectly explains everything, I think, better than the explanation we would have had to run with if we were going according to Ibn Ezra. Okay, so that's one of the two big questions of the discrepancies between Ezra chapter 2 and Nehemiah chapter 7. What about the other discrepancy, right? And this one's bigger. Names, family names suddenly change because one person's writing it down and another person's writing it down. What's going on? Okay, so let's continue on in the chapter to discuss that further. Okay. All right, we're about to start verse 49. Any questions before we continue?
Yeah.
Any questions?
I feel ashamed.
No, just let it go. Let it go. People are human. People make mistakes. Don't
We learn from them.
Yeah.
Anyways, my question is, how could have things been different if people didn't have hatred for no reason the second base to Mikdash?
If there's no hatred in the second base of Mikdash, the Romans would not have overpowered the Jews because people were hating each other too much. They weren't united, and the house divided is a house more easily conquered.
Not like what happened in the first base of Mikdash.
Right. So people have to be willing to sacrifice a bit for ways of peace.
Well, what I don't understand is how is the second base of Mikdash continuation of the destruction of the first base of Mikdash?
The second base of Mikdash is the continuation of the destruction of the first base of Mikdash, because the second base of Mikdash never overturned the exile completely, because as God told through Haggai, the people had to return to the Holy Land to break the curse of not having for example, the covenant Ark of the Covenant, and therefore the Shekhinah constantly in the temple. Because they didn't return to the land en masse sufficiently, therefore the problems of the exile were not overturned, and therefore there was never a complete recovery from the exile of Babylon. Even today in the exile,
Bnei Israel should be more careful.
Well, we weren't there. We don't have to blame, but we do know this is that
criticism to the Jews
we don't have to criticize anyone. Just understand, because we're in the generation of the redemption. We don't have to criticize anyone. We just have to understand why it happened and not make the same mistake. So if you look at on Tisha B'Av, and we've the fast of Av, on that fast day we mourn for two temples, not just one, right? In theory, we should have only okay. For those who read the Megillah of Eicha, which is on the first temple, it's understandable, but really, our current suffering, isn't it only from the second temple's destruction? No, it's not. That's the point. That's why we read the Megillah Eicha, and Megillah Eicha is primarily on which destruction? The first destruction, right? So we're still trying to overcome the problems of the exile, but it's not enough to overturn the exile of Rome. It's also important to completely overturn the exile of Babylon. God's plan was that all Jews should return. He said he's returning them, and many chose to stay behind, and it thwarted God's plan to bless the people. So
Stupid.
again, you're judging. Don't judge. We don't have to say it was a mistake. You can say that.
I'm sorry. It should have been more careful.
Well, when God gives you advice, it's good to take it. So,
I know.
okay, continuing on in the verse 49 in the Hebrew. B'nai Hanan, B'nai Gidel, B'nai Gachar, B'nai Ra'aya, B'nai Ritzin, B'nai Nakoda, B'nai Gazam, B'nai Uzzah, B'nai Faseach, B'nai Vesai, B'nai Ma'unim, B'nai Nafish Sim, B'nai Vakbuk, B'nai Chakufa, B'nai Charchor, B'nai Vatzlis, B'nai Mechida, B'nai Charsha, B'nai Varkos, B'nai Sisra, B'nai Samach, B'nai Netziach, B'nai Chatifa, B'nai Avdei Shlomo, B'nai Sotai, B'nai Soferes, B'nai Perida, B'nai Yala, B'nai Darkon, B'nai Gidel, B'nai Shefatja, B'nai Chatil, B'nai Pocheres, Hatzavayim, B'nai Amon, Kol Nasinim, B'nai Avdei Shlomo, Shlosh Meos Tishim Ushnoyim. Okay, please translate through verse 60. Linda, 49 through 60.
The children of Hanan, the children of Gidel, the children of Gahar, the children of Reiah, the children of Rezin, the children of Nekoda, the children of Gazam, the children of Uzzah, the children of Paseah, the children of Besai, the children of Meunim, the children of Nephishesim, the children of Babuk, the children of Hakupha, the children of Harher, the children of Bazlith, the children of Mehidiah, the children of Harsha, the children of Barkos, the children of Sisera, the children of Tama, the children of Neziah, the children of Paphia, the children of Solomon's slaves, the children of Sotai, the children of Sephareth, the children of Perida, the children of Jaala, the children of Darkon, the children of Gedel, the children of Zephatiah, the children of Hatiel, the children of Porkereth Hazibeam, the children of Ammon, all of the Nethinim, and the children of Solomon's slaves were 392.
Mhm.
Did I stop too soon?
No, again, just reiterating what we mentioned previously, the Nesinim, the former Gibeonites, they willfully came back to the Holy Land to be with the Hebrews, showing that how well they must have been treated to wanted to be still remain a part of the temple service. So sometimes the implication of a concept is extremely powerful. So
Is that why 53 is so important? Because these are people who are not Jewish, but it's what he says in 53 that makes me think these names are really important, that God remembers what they overcame. He remembers their name.
53, which 53?
Page 58, verse 53.
Oh, the commentary.
Yeah,
These never represent negative qualities that the settlers overcame in ascending to the Holy Land and constructing the temple.
that's why I said what I said, that Hashem remembers their names because they overcame negative qualities to build his temple. What a lesson for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a saying in the Talmud, the whole world was created simply for the purpose of a person overcoming their evil inclination. So just growing, overcoming difficulties in life. Somebody, is rude to you, and you don't act as rudely back to them as you did previously. You're growing spiritually. So these kind of things are important.
Well, if he remembers their names, he's going to remember everyone else's too.
Yeah, if a person's addicted to eating donuts, maybe next time only buy 11 instead of a full dozen. So, so and there are many ways we could improve. God willing. Okay, so verse 61 and continuing. Ve'ele ha'olim mi'tel malach tel charsha karuv adon v'imer v'lo yachlu lagid beis avosam v'zaram im mi'Yisraelhem. B'nei Delaya, b'nei Tovia, b'nei Nokta, Sheish Meos v'Arbaim Shnoim. Umin HaKohanim, b'nei Chalvaya, b'nei Hakotz, b'nei Barzilai, Asher Lakach Mibenos Barzilai, Hal Giladi Isha Vaikare Al Shamam, Ila Bikshu Chesavam Hamis Yachsim V'lo Nimtza Vaya Goalu Mina Kahuna, Vayomer Hatir Shasa Lahem Asher Lo Yochlu Mikodesh HaKadashim Ad Amod HaKohen L'Urim Sumim. Kol HaKahal Ke'echad Arba Ribo Alpayim Shlosh Meos V'Shishim. Milvad Avdehem V'Amhosehem Elish Shivim Alafim Shlosh Meos Shloshim V'Shiva V'Lehem Meshorarim Meshoraros Masayim V'Arba V'Chamisha. Susehem Shava Meos Shlosh V'Shisha Pirdehem Masayim Arbaim V'Chamisha. Gemalim Arba Meos Shloshim V'Chamisha Chamorim Sheshes Alafim Shava Meos V'Esrim. Umikutsas Rashi Havos Nasnu Lamelacha Hatir Shasa Nasan Laotzar Zahav Darkamonim Elef Mizrakos Chamishim Kasnos Kohanim Shloshim Vachamesh Meos. Ume Roshei Ha'avos Nasnu Laotzar Hamelacha Zahav Darkamonim Shtei Ribos V'Chesef Manim Alpayim Umasayim. Okay, please translate verses 61 through 70.
These are the ones who went up from Tamila to Harsha, Cherub, Adon, and Immer, and could not declare their fathers' families and their descent, whether they were from Israel. The children of Delaiah, the children of Tobiah, the children of Nekoda, 642. Of the Kohanim, the children of Habaiah, the children of Hakos, the children of Barzillai, who took wives from the daughters of Barzillai of Gilead and were called by their name. These sought their genealogical records, but it could not be found, so they were disqualified from the priesthood. I can't say that name. Hatashathia told them
Hatir Shatha.
Hatashatha told them that they should not eat of the most holy offerings until there would arise a Cohen to inquire of the Urim and the Tumim. The
Okay,
entire
actually, I wanted to cover the commentary on 65. So 65, page 58, it talks about Hatshepsut Metzudas identifies him as Nehemiah. That was his original name in by the the as in the book of Daniel, the kings of those empires used to give new names to their workers. So Hatshepsut means the one who had permission to drink. He was the wine taster for the king at first before he became governor of Judah. So um, so let's look at the commentary. Until there would arise a coin to inquire of the Urim V'Tumim. That's the biblical name for the parchment bearing the ineffable name of God, which was inserted into the breastplate, the Choshen, worn by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, in Exodus chapter 28, verse 30. Okay, so um, skipping to the paragraph that says the Urim V'Tumim was lost to the Jewish people when the first temple was destroyed, and it was not restored during the times of the second temple. No Urim V'Tumim in the second temple. You understand? So the Babylonian exile removed Urim V'Tumim from the Jewish people,
they couldn't ask God any questions.
right? Even until today. So that's what I'm
Oh,
saying. It's really been kind of like a 2,400-year exile in a sense. And
this is why the second. Oh, you explained everything.
yeah, and
But
but
Rabbi
I mean,
and Baal Shem Tov were able to ask Hashem the question even without Urim for today.
well, so the thing is this is that it's the implication of the laws of Tisha B'Av, but nobody really talks about it. Everybody says we're in the exile of Rome, right? The Roman exile, but really, from my perspective, we're still in the Babylonian exile because God's plan to take us out was foiled when the people refused to accept the holiness. Therefore, they didn't get the Urim V'Tumim. If they don't have the Urim V'Tumim and the age of prophecy is ending, they're messed up. They're cut off from heaven. You understand? So
Yeah.
how could you even say that it was a full temple period? You know what I'm saying? And clearly there was no Ark of the Covenant. There was no perpetual Shekhinah. There was no Urim V'Tumim. The red phone to heaven.
There were no blessings on the second temple,
Yeah.
especially like the first temple.
So,
That's what you're saying, right? Did I
right, but
understand?
however, many commandments were reinstituted once there was a temple in place. Today, under 300 commandments are observable because most of the 630 commandments are connected to the temple or having a temple in place. For example, you need a temple to have the purification process. So all the laws of purity, if you touch an unclean thing, you have to bathe, etc. All that is interrupted also if there's no temple, and other laws too. So many laws. Half of the Torah commandments are cut off if there's no temple. So having the second temple was very important from the perspective of mitzvahs, but from the perspective of being connected to God, having miracles, having a supernatural spiritual presence if you go to the temple that you could feel, having God's red phone to heaven, the Urim V'Tumim, giving us messages from heaven. That was separated from the Jewish people since the time of Babylon until today. So here, Nehemiah Hatshepsut. So clearly, then the statement "until there would arise a coin from Urim V'Tumim" refers to the final redemption in Messianic times. Nehemiah knew, through Haggai. Remember, we studied in the book of Haggai this. That there would be no Urim V'Tumim until the temple's restored in the third temple. So Nehemiah was saying, that's only for the final redemption. We're just doing what we can to serve Hashem. And again, it was vital to keep the second temple going because there are so many commandments connected to the temple. It's one thing to serve God without being able to talk to Him through prophecy or in Batumim. It's another thing not to be able to serve God with half the commandments, as is today. It's the spiritual frustration. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that the beautiful commandments in the Chumash, every other commandment is unobservable completely until the temple's rebuilt. It's really it could be a source of frustration. So again, verse 65, Nehemiah told them they should not eat of the most holy offerings until they would arise a coin to inquire of the Urim Batumim. In other words, we cannot do it for another 2,400 years. That was a
horrible.
Yeah. But he wrote. You see, he recorded this in his Babylonian name, his Persian name, because it's not what he wanted to say. It's what he was forced to under the circumstance. But he was correct. He taught them the correct halacha. Okay, please continue the translation. Verse 66.
The entire congregation together numbered 42,360. Besides their male slaves and female slaves, of which there were 7,337, they also had 245 male singers and female singers. The camels numbered 435, the donkeys 6,720. Some of the family heads contributed for the work. Hartashatha contributed to the treasury of gold, 1,000 golden darkamans, and 50 basins, and priestly robes, 530.
Okay, and one more verse.
Some of the heads of the families contributed to the work fund of gold, 20,000 darkamans, and of silver, 2,200 manes.
Thank God, it's beautiful that people donate towards God's house. It's nice when people donate to a synagogue, but to the actual building of the temple, that's amazing. Okay, verse 71. Vasher nasnu she'eris ha'al zahav darkamonim shtei ribo v'chesev manim al poyim v'chaznos kohanim shishim v'shiva. Please translate 71.
What the rest of the people contributed was of gold, 20,000 darkamans, of silver, 2,000 manes, and 67 priestly tunics.
Now, we've discussed previously about the 10 tribes. So, and we demonstrated that, we did a survey of the Book of Chronicles as well. We demonstrated that there were families of each of the 12 tribes. The other 10 tribes besides Judah and Benjamin joined with Judah in the days of Josiah, King Josiah, and some also with King Hezekiah. So then the question was, did we know they united again with a minority of the 10 tribes reunited with Judah and Benjamin before the Babylonian exile, but after the Babylonian exile, our next question was, did they reunite with the Jewish people leaving Babylon and going to build the second temple. Okay, so we concluded that they probably did, but here is scriptural evidence that they certainly did. Okay, verse 72: Vayishvu hakonim levim v'ashorim v'mashorim uminham v'nesinim b'chol Yisrael ba'arehem v'yigab hachodesh hashvi v'nei Yisrael ba'arehem. Please translate verse 72, Linda.
The Kohanim and the Levites and the gatekeepers and the singers and some of the people and the Nethinim and all of Israel settled in their cities. The seventh month arrived, and the children of Israel were settled in their cities.
But we learned previously that it was a minority of the people returned. That's why there was no Urim V'Tumim. That's why there was no Ark of the Covenant. So what does it mean, all Israel settled in their cities? Let's look at the commentary. Some of the people, these were the members of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, Matsudos. V'chol Yisrael and all of Israel, these were the members of all the tribes other than Judah and Benjamin, Matsudos. Matsudos David holds that this verse is telling us the 10 tribes, all of Israel means, Kol Yisrael means 10 tribes returned from Babylon along with the Jews during the Second Temple period.
So everyone came back.
So again,
all 12 tribes.
Right, just families. When
not
God
the whole
says,
thing, not
right,
all the.
Exactly. When God says in other prophets that he will restore Ephraim, so and the lost tribes, it's talking about the majority. God cares about the majority if they're missing. But as far as the 12 tribes of Israel, representing a spiritual force, kabbalistically, the discussion about how each tribe brings spirituality to each aspect of the constellations and the zodiac, a whole bunch of stuff. It's important to have not just 2 tribes but 12 tribes. God planned this out carefully. The creator of the universe planned this out really carefully. But here, it's pretty obvious. We have clear verse saying not just in the days of Hezekiah and Josiah, but also in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah. All 12 tribes were united in Jerusalem. And so then it's said that when they were exiled from the Romans, the Jews who became the Ashkenazim were all 12 tribes. The Jews who came the Sephardim were mostly the inhabitants of Jerusalem, which was mostly at that time Judah and the Kohanim, the priests. That's why if you go to average Sephardic synagogue, you may see like a half dozen Kohanim, giving Birkas Kohanim. And you go to an Ashkenaz synagogue, there may be, on average, 1 to 3 Kohanim. Many more Kohanim among the Sephardim than among the Ashkenaz. So that's actually just a fulfillment of history of the exile. And again, we discussed this previously. This distribution of Ashkenazim and Sephardim, the Jews of the Roman exile being divided, is actually forecast by the prophet Obadiah. So if you turn there for a second. Okay, right after the book of Amos. Verse verse 20 and 21. וגלוס ההיכל הזה לבני ישראל אשר כנענים עד צרפס וגלוס ירושלים אשר בספרד ירשו אס ערי הנגב ועלו מושים בהר ציון לשפוט את הר ישראל וישראל לאדוני המלוכה. And this exiled host of the children of Israel who are among the Canaanites until Zarephath, and the exile of Jerusalem, which is in Sepharad, the Hebrew word for Spain, will and Zarephath is the Hebrew word for France, will inherit the cities of the south. So, remember, if you look in the map before, Green Line, etc., Israel had Beersheba and all the cities surrounding it, but they had very few cities in the heartlands. Back in 1948. And then the book of Obadiah concludes, and saviors will ascend to Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Esau, and the kingdom will be Hashem's. Okay. So it's told that the Zarephath and the Sepharad will be the two sections of Judaism for the most part. And that means Zarephath, it refers to France, where the Ashkenazim went before they eventually moved to Germany, etc. And and Sepharad went to Morocco and Arab lands. So that's how it divided. But it was already foretold by Obadiah back in the generation of Elijah. Even before the exile of the 10 tribes, it was all already explained where people would go. So God was telling the 10 tribes, the righteous among you who are not exiled will cling to Judah and be exiled with him to these lands. So but it wasn't said explicitly like that, right? As otherwise that could be depressing. But it's now it's obvious what was going on in that prophecy. Amazing. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so Kol Yisrael, remember verse 72, chapter 7, all Israel. And we learned previously several times, it was not all Israel, right? There was not even there's not even 30% of Israel in the Holy Land. Therefore, all Israel can only mean, just like Matsudas David says, all the tribes of Israel. Proof in Tanakh, clear verse. Any questions? Q&A question time. Q&A.
Well, the singers, it says that the singers and that the singers sang throughout the whole journey. So whenever Israel traveled, were they singing everywhere they went, even in the desert? Did Israel sing all the time?
Well, if you recall
yeah, go ahead.
You recall Psalm 137?
Yes.
Okay, let's look at Psalm 137.
Where they hurt themselves so they wouldn't sing?
No, that was in the other book that we were studying. But here, 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and also wept when we remembered Zion.
Mm-hmm.
On the billows within it, we hung our lyres. For there our captors requested words of song from us, and our lyres playing joyous music. Sing for us from Zion's song. How can we sing the song of Hashem upon the alien soil? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. Let my tongue adhere to my palate if I fail to recall you. If I fail to elevate Jerusalem above my foremost joy. Remember Hashem for the offspring of Edom, the day of Jerusalem. For those who say destroy to its very foundation, O violated daughter of Babylon, praiseworthy is he who repays you in accordance with the manner that you treated us. Praiseworthy is he who will clutch and dash your infants against the rod. So now you see this verse. First of all, it's saying, how can we sing the song of God on alien soil? Without the temple, what's the point of singing? So there's decreased song in any generation without the temple. But there's another concept here, based on what we were just talking about. It's appropriate we quote from here. In this same psalm, Edom and Babylon are mentioned, the two exiles, and it's talking about destruction. So therefore, Psalm 137 is most appropriate, not just right after the destruction of the first temple, but also during the exile of Edom, right? Of the current exile, the Roman exile, and we're still suffering from the destruction by Babylon and the exile there. So it's
that's
amazing.
why they only sang on the way back to Jerusalem.
Right. They had decreased mirth. Nowadays, besides the Sabbath day, there are people who avoid singing except on the Sabbath day, as a remembrance of the destruction of the temple. And my father was among them. Was very
Interesting.
yeah. He was very strict about that. My father did not go to concerts. Even Jewish concerts that the Jews nowadays are accustomed to go to. But he refused to go to a concert until the temple's rebuilt. He would the only time he'd hear live music was at a wedding. Otherwise, he wouldn't listen to live music. So, thank God. Glad I had a very nice father. Sure. Okay. Any other questions before we call it an evening? All right. Thank you. Thanks to everyone coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Sure. If you have any questions